Chapter 20. From the date of the expedition with Tari, which I have just narrated, the child paid me frequent visits. He had taken a liking to me, which I cordially returned. Indeed, as he was not yet 12 years old, and had not commenced the course of scientific studies with which childhood closes in that country, my intellect was less inferior to his than to that of the elder members of his race, especially of the GE, and most especially of the accomplished Z. The children of the Vrilya, having upon their minds the weight of so many active duties and grave responsibilities, are not generally mirthful, but Tari, with all his wisdom, had much of the playful good humor one often finds the characteristic of elderly men of genius. He felt that sort of pleasure in my society which a boy of similar age in the upper world has in the company of a pet dog or monkey. It amused him to try and teach me the ways of his people, as it amuses a nephew of mine to make his poodle walk on his hind legs or jump through a hoop. I willingly lent myself to such experiments, but I never achieved the success of the poodle. I was very much interested at first in the attempt to ply the wings which the youngest of the Vrilya use as nimbly and easily as ours do their legs and arms, but my efforts were attended with contusions serious enough to make me abandon them in despair. These wings, as I have before said, are very large, reaching to the knee, and in repose thrown back so as to form a very graceful mantle. They are composed from the feathers of a gigantic bird that abounds in the rocky heights of the country, the color mostly white, but sometimes with reddish streaks. They are fastened round the shoulders with light but strong springs of steel, and, when expanded, the arms slide through loops for that purpose, forming, as it were, a stout central membrane. As the arms are raised, the tubular lining beneath the vest or tunic becomes, by mechanical contrivance, inflated with air, increased or diminished at will by the movement of the arms, and serving to buoy the whole form as on bladders. The wings and the balloon-like apparatus are highly charged with vril, and when the body is thus wafted upward, it seems to become singularly lightened of its weight. I found it easy enough to soar from the ground. Indeed, when the wings were spread, it was scarcely possible not to soar. But then came the difficulty and the danger. I utterly failed in the power to use and direct the pinions, though I am considered among my own race unusually alert and ready in bodily exercises, and am a very practised swimmer. I could only make the most confused and blundering efforts at flight. I was the servant of the wings. The wings were not my servants. They were beyond my control, and when, by a violent strain of muscle, and, I must fairly own, in that abnormal strength which is given by excess of fright, I curbed their gyrations and brought them near to the body, it seemed as if I lost the sustaining power stored in them and the connecting bladders, as when the air is let out of a balloon, and found myself precipitated again to the earth. Saved, indeed, by some spasmodic flutterings from being dashed to pieces, but not saved from the bruises and the stun of a heavy fall. I would, however, have persevered in my attempts, but for the advice or the commands of the scientific Z, who had benevolently accompanied my flutterings, and, indeed, on the last occasion, flying just under me, received my form as it fell on her own expanded wings, and preserved me from breaking my head on the roof of the pyramid from which we had ascended. "I see," she said, "that your trials are in vain, not from the fault of the wings and their appurtenances, nor from any imperfectness and malformation of your own corpuscular system, but from the irremediable, because organic, defect in your power of volition. Learn that the connection between the will and the agencies of that fluid which has been subjected to the control of the Vrilya was never established by the first discoverers, never achieved by a single generation. It has gone on increasing, like other properties of race, in proportion as it has been uniformly transmitted from parent to child, so that at last it has become an instinct, and an infant arm of our race wills to fly as intuitively and unconsciously as he wills to walk. He thus plies his invented or artificial wings with as much safety as a bird plies those with which it is born. I did not think sufficiently of this when I allowed you to try an experiment which allured me, for I have longed to have in you a companion. I shall abandon the experiment now. Your life is becoming dear to me." Herewith the Gee's voice and face softened, and I felt more seriously alarmed than I had been in my previous flights. Now that I am on the subject of wings, I ought not to omit mention of a custom among the Gee which seems to me very pretty and tender in the sentiment it implies. A Gee wears wings habitually when yet a virgin. She joins the Arna in their aerial sports. She adventures alone and afar into the wilder regions of the sunless world. In the boldness and height of her soaring, not less than in the grace of her movements, she excels the opposite sex. But from the day of her marriage she wears wings no more. She suspends them with her own willing hand over the nuptial couch, never to be resumed unless the marriage tie be severed by divorce or death. Now, when Z's voice and eyes thus softened, and at that softening I prophetically recoiled and shuddered, Tari, who had accompanied us in our flights, but who, childlike, had been much more amused with my awkwardness than sympathizing in my fears or aware of my danger, hovered over us, poised amidst spread wings, and hearing the endearing words of the young Gee, laughed aloud. Said he, "If the Tish cannot learn the use of wings, you may still be his companion, Z, for you can suspend your own."